The Russian leader Vladimir Putin is tossing and turning in his bed. Today, he's dreaming about US-made M1A2 Abrams tanks churning up the ground, Russian soldiers screaming as they're mangled under the tracks. All these tanks are heading in the direction of the Russia-Ukraine border. Mr. Putin's dream, or shall we say nightmare, might become a reality soon as some of the best tanks in the world are being sent to Ukraine. And somewhere embossed in their frames are the words, "Made in the USA." This game just changed significantly. Right around the time we started making the show, U.S. news reports stated that Putin launched a series of missile and drone attacks against Ukraine in retaliation for Joe Biden announcing that U.S. tanks will indeed be on Ukraine soil at some point. Putin might well have been infuriated, which, according to the press, is why his forces blasted the capital Kyiv and yet again caused mayhem when Ukraine's energy infrastructure was hit. Putin said Ukraine and the West are escalating things again, especially after Germany also announced it would be sending some of its own tanks to Ukraine. Hardly a long trip. Russian officials seem to feel vindicated, saying all along this conflict has been a proxy war between Russia and a U.S. NATO alliance. The deputy chairman of the Security Council and former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev shared stern words after the U.S. tank news, saying the defeat of a nuclear power in a conventional war can trigger a nuclear war. Putin knows that the U.S.'s formidable M1 Abrams and Germany's Leopard 2s are a threat to the Russian war effort. But the tanks themselves might not be the reason Putin is scared. Perhaps the change in the way the West is thinking about this war is the reason for his nightmares. We'll explore both options in this show, so let's just establish some facts first. The West has just upped the ante, according to Russia. As the saying goes, them's fighting words. Russia's ambassador to Germany, Sergei Nakhaev, just said as much when he contended that sending modern Western tanks to Ukraine from Germany is extremely dangerous and poses a new level of confrontation. Putin, of course, is well aware that until now, Ukraine has been relying on tanks from another era, many of them T-72s that were used back in the days of the Soviet Union. Ukraine has said time and again that this is not good enough, not if the West is serious about helping it out. It needs modern tanks, not relics, to defeat and push back their invaders. Ukraine said it would like 100 of these high-tech tanks, but perhaps it's wishful thinking, as you'll soon understand. It's not as if anyone can just use such powerful hardware as soon as it arrives. Modern tanks are complicated. It's not like riding a bike. Ukrainian soldiers will need to be trained, especially where U.S. tanks are concerned. Germany said it would send over 14 Leopard 2s, tanks that quite often make it onto lists of the world's best, or at least the latest variations of them. Tank enthusiasts, yes, they do exist, might disagree about which tanks are more superior, but there can be no doubt that Germany's Leopard 2s are up there. They're nimble, reaching speeds of around 44 miles per hour, and they have a cruising range of about 280 miles. We won't go much into its firepower and the armor of these tanks. It's mostly irrelevant as both the Leopards and the Abrams far outclass any tanks Russia can field at the moment. There are about 2,000 German-made Leopard 2s in various European countries right now, although it's not certain how many of those are battle-ready. Germany has said it hopes that the countries that bought the tank might follow its lead and send their Leopard 2s over to Ukraine. Spain and the Netherlands have already said they might do just that. When we started making the show, the Netherlands had said the decision has not yet been made. We'll explain soon what this indecision is all about. While Russia has its excellent late-iteration T-90s and the beast of the T-14 Armata, arguably in the top 3 tanks in the world if Russian claims are true, in terms of mobility, firepower, armor, and, importantly, high-tech systems, it would be hard to beat the U.S.'s M1A2 Abrams. Biden said he'd send over 31 of them, which is an entire tank battalion, worth in the region of $400 million. Just a drop in the ocean so far in terms of this war and what the U.S. has been sending over to Ukraine. 31 might not sound like a lot when you consider Ukraine has already about 1,890 tanks, but of those, only 1,323 are reported to be battle-ready. And as we said, we're talking about tanks that have seen action last around the time Neil Armstrong first stepped foot on the moon. Just recently, Ukrainian soldiers fighting in an armored unit close to Bakhmut complained that they were using tanks that should have been retired before most of the commanders were born. Their T-72s are constantly breaking down, and much of the time they're visiting scrap heaps to look for new parts, or ripping up captured Russian tanks to make Frankenstein machines, Tankensteins. As you know from our other shows, Russia has lost a ton of tanks. Its tank crews have also had to make do with stuff from the 70s, sometimes engaging in making homemade armor because the armor they should have had was just not there. Russia had planned to build 2,300 of its next-generation Armata T-14s, but it seems there were issues with production over the past few years. To date, only a handful have been built. According to Kremlin-backed news services, in Russia, speaking in December 2022, the T-14s Russia does have were recently deployed to Ukraine. In terms of a face-off, the old-school T-72s are no match at all for these T-14s. They are totally different beasts. Luckily, Russia's claims are probably not true. And if they are, there's likely less than a dozen of the tanks in the country. Everything is more advanced in the T-14s. Mobility, protection, communications, firepower, with the T-14s being fitted with sensors and other tech that wasn't even dreamed about in the 70s or the 80s. Given massively improved situational awareness, armor, alleged stealth capabilities, and the pinpoint accuracy of its anti-tank missiles and main cannon, yeah, the T-72 and the T-14 are different machines altogether. That's if you take Russia's word for it, of course. A Ukrainian deputy commander recently said the Ukrainian army is in desperate need of Western tanks now, not tomorrow. He told the press, "The Leopard is what we need right now. The high-precision sights and the night vision work in any weather." He added that another reason is simply the Russians are afraid of the Leopard. They have good reason to be. This doesn't mean they're any better than the Abrams. They're not, but the Ukrainians are confident that they can repair and supply the German tanks. Because, let's remember, these are European tanks and parts are always close by. One of the Ukrainian army mechanics said he could deal with the Leopards, no sweat, telling the media, "The main thing is that I know how to get everything running again." You should also know that the engines are not the same as the Abrams. That's why the US at first said it wouldn't send them. They're just too hard to maintain and repair. Others have rightly pointed out that the logistical support infrastructure for the tanks will have to be established in Ukraine before any modern tanks roll to the battlefield. This will not be easy, and that's an understatement. The Leopard 2 first arrived in service in 1979, but there have been a lot of upgrades over the years. It doesn't have very different weapon systems from the Abrams, but the tech in the Abrams is considerably different, and the armor systems are also quite different. What Ukraine is saying is, send over the Leopards now, and we can use them, and we'll wait for the Abrams in the meantime. As we said before, using tanks is not like riding a bike, especially when it comes to modern tanks. So even when those American tanks get there, Ukrainian crews will have to know what they're doing. Not everyone's confident this will be a walk in the park. The good news, according to some analysts, is that the Leopard 2 is much easier to master than many of the world's most advanced tanks. This means that Ukrainian soldiers won't have to make the harsh jump from Cold War-era tech straight into the advanced features of the Abrams. The Leopard 2 will act as a stepping stone. A former U.S. national security advisor said once those Ukrainians can use the Abrams, Russia is in big trouble. He told the media, "If the crew knows what it's doing, it's well-trained, does the preps, the fire checks, maintains the tank well, you just can't miss, and everything you hit is catastrophically destroyed." You only need to look at the Iraq War and see the damage the American Abrams, the German Leopards, and the British Challengers did. They can make a huge difference in Ukraine. In Iraq, an FV-4034 Challenger achieved a kill at more than 3.17 miles. At the time, it was the farthest known tank versus tank kill in history. This is the stuff of nightmares for Putin, if indeed these tanks will perform like that. Iraqi tank crews and T-72s were constantly outmaneuvered and outgunned by the British and American tanks. In any case, the trip to Europe and the training that has to happen will likely mean that the Abrams aren't put into use for several more months from now, while the Leopards should be getting mud stuck in their tracks a lot sooner, which is why Ukraine is talking about them so much. Some U.S. officials have also pointed out that the Leopards make much more sense. But it seems the U.S. is sending those Abrams whatever the naysayers say. Fighting has been hard for Ukraine lately, and it doesn't look like it'll be much more progress if they don't get these tanks. Russian troops have dug in this winter, and Ukrainian counteroffensives will not by any means be easy without a lot of extra firepower. Ukraine is saying that in the coming weeks and months, it's expecting what one official called a Russian onslaught. This might just happen when Ukraine is very vulnerable. This is why Zelensky has been so vocal about wanting tanks. Alongside Germany, as we said, the Netherlands and Spain will likely get involved, and the British have already agreed to send over 14 of the much-vaunted tanks we've mentioned, the Challenger 2s. This agreement didn't happen without a fight. The UK had first said it wasn't going to send over any main battle tanks, but it changed its mind in January, actually before the US and Germany made their decisions. The new British Prime Minister said the move happened in line with the country's recent ambition to intensify support. In fact, when the UK told Ukraine about its new package and Germany didn't immediately follow, Ukrainian Deputy Foreign Minister Andriy Melnyk said, "It was a huge disappointment for all Ukrainians. It's not difficult to understand why Germany was hesitant, given its history. If you're wondering why other countries have been hesitant to send battle tanks to Ukraine and why some are still holding back, it's mostly because they've been hoping this war would be settled already. As we told you earlier, these are offensive weapons, and many countries have been supporting Ukraine mostly in a defensive capacity. No one wants this war to spread through Europe and possibly become another world war. A Kremlin spokesperson issued a warning in January, saying this is exactly what would happen. He said these battle tanks will bring more suffering and more tension to the continent. He added that when U.S. tanks do get to Ukraine, they will burn down just like all the others, and nothing much will change. He would say that, though. He wants European taxpayers to think their money's being wasted. The question is it? One thing everyone on the Ukraine side is saying is that escalation is the last thing they want. The UK said the new tank package is only for Ukraine's defensive firepower, which it hopes will bring about a lasting peace. Still, it's not as if he would have said anything else. He's a politician, and politicians often say not what's true, but what they think the public should hear. Does he really think more tanks will bring peace? Listen on and make your mind up after we tell you a few more things. The UK says all Russia has to do is get out of Ukraine, and that'll be that. Joe Biden said the same. He told the media, "There's no offensive threat to Russia. If Russian troops return to Russia, where they belong, this war would be over today." This obviously isn't an option for Russia, and Putin's endless threats about escalation are no longer being taken seriously by the West. Russia has already escalated this war as far as it could go, and going nuclear would ensure defeat, not only for Russia but perhaps the entire world. Fears of Russia attacking the rest of Europe for their support of Ukraine are flat out silly when you consider how badly it's losing against Ukraine. Russia can only afford so many losing wars at once. This is what ultimately scares Putin. Even if he could take out all the Western tanks being sent to Ukraine right now, there's nothing stopping Germany or the US from sending more. His threats aren't taken seriously anymore. Sure, Putin is having nightmares, but perhaps not just about human casualties. Perhaps he's haunted about the turning point his special operation has reached in Ukraine and how this will impact his position in power. Now you need to watch Key Weapon for Ukraine's next stage of the war, or have a look at why US enemies are scared of the Abrams X next generation tank.